From the 22 News Plus studio, this is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of InFocus. I am your host, Patrick Berry, and today's a fascinating conversation, yet another one. If you have a child in, say, elementary school, middle school, or into high school, or maybe you had a child in those classroom settings, then you probably came across a school counselor at some point in their lives. Well, I'm very happy today to be joined across the desk in the 22 News Plus studios with Bob Bardwell. He's the executive director of the Massachusetts School Counselors Association. Bob, thank you so very much for joining me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So the big question I have for you, Bob, is what does a school counselor do? We only got 30 minutes.
Yes, right. So my favorite answer is it depends. It depends. You mentioned the three levels. Elementary counselor is going to do very different things than a high school counselor. A counselor in a rural district is going to sometimes do different things than a counselor in a suburban or an urban district. And sometimes it depends on who your boss is. So a building leader is going to tell you they want you to do this, and that might not be what you're trained to do or what you want to do. So there's a whole host of options. We have three buckets of work. We have the future planning, so what the kid is going to do after high school, or after middle school, or after elementary school. Typically leads to the next level. We also deal with academics, primarily more in high school, but certainly some in middle school where students struggling, needs help, support, picking classes, things like that. And then there's now the social emotional piece, which is super relevant today because so much is going on around mental health. So we help students deal with personal issues, challenges, etc. So it's a lot of variety, and sometimes you don't know what the day will bring because you don't know what's going to walk in the door.
Well, it's interesting because you've already changed my thought process because I thought it was just guidance counseling. Okay, hey, little boy or girl, what do you want to do? And when you graduate high school in June, but it's much more than that.
Absolutely. And we don't use the guidance word anymore. It's school counselor, although many people out there still use guidance. That's sort of a new brand, rebranding, because a lot of people think we're just to do college or change schedules.
Right.
And we're much more than that. We also in schools have social workers, and in Massachusetts, we have school adjustment counselors. So there are other support personnel. Those two groups primarily focus on social emotional, but a school counselor is trained to do that. And in many cases does that, especially if they're the only one. So yeah, we're not guidance counselors anymore. We're, nowadays we talk about 3 tiers of intervention in schools. Tier 1 is for all students. Tier 2 are for smaller, like 15%, 10 to 15%, and then tier 3 is like 5 to 10%. School counselors serve all students in tier 1, or they should be, if they're doing it well. Now, again, they may work in a school. I've worked in some districts where counselors are not allowed to do what they should be doing or are doing other things because they're needed to. So again, you have a whole range of what you actually will see in the schools.
So I go back to, and it's a long time ago, to my time in a school system. We only had the high school. So are counselors now across all levels of education?
Absolutely. And they may have been one back when you were in elementary school, but if you didn't need the resources, you probably didn't know they existed. Or in many cases, they would have been in multiple schools.
We're talking the 70s, Bob.
Yeah, I was there too. So then my person may have come once a week and only saw a couple kids, and then they went to another, depending on the size of the school. So think about it, though. Students need support at all points.
Well, that's exactly kind of my point. Is I just remember the high school side of it, but I would think, I was going to say high school needs more, but no, all 8 grade levels.
Think of the penal system. We don't do enough.
High school was a penal system,
but it's the same way where we don't do enough early on to prevent kids from getting into trouble, and then they get in trouble, and then we rehab them. If we had enough school counselors and the elementary schools or more, then we would be able to hopefully get them on the right path so that their future is solid. But that doesn't work all the time. But we do need more elementary school counselors. Now, keep in mind, again, they may have a social worker or a school adjustment counselor, so there is someone providing services. But a school counselor will always have the lens of future planning. And so, a 3rd grader needs to know about college careers and military just like a 6th grader or an 8th grader or a 10th grader. But you're right, because we started that way. The history of school counseling started in the 50s with the space race to Russia's space race. And so as a result, the federal government hired these people called vocational counselors to come in and support students to look at careers. Because back then, all you knew is what you knew in your family or your neighborhood.
Right.
Right. So I want to be an astronaut. I don't even know what that is. I don't know anyone that does it, but
I saw it on
counselor,
TV.
right. A counselor could come in and help explore those careers and give you different opportunities so that you can expand your horizons.
So my next question is probably has a very long answer to it. Who can be a counselor? I mean, is there specific schooling in addition to, say, your teaching certificate, or do you even need a teaching certificate?
Well, it used to be back in the old day, you needed a teaching certificate first.
Okay.
That is no longer the case. So typically, people going into the field have a bachelor's degree in something. It could be psychology, social work. I have a bachelor's degree in education, so I was in a school environment, but I didn't want to teach full time. But you have to go to graduate school. You need a master's degree, and usually that's anywhere between 45 and 60 credits to be certified by the State Department of Elementary and Secondary Education.
And that's to be a counselor.
Yep.
It's spanning all grade levels.
Right. So it's you could be a kindergarten or a senior counselor. It's same for social work and school adjustment. We all have there are different requirements for those three things, but we all have to have a master's degree.
So do you specialize? Like the way you kind of described that, there's career counselors, adjustment counselors. Do you specialize in a specific aspect of counseling?
The three buckets, yeah. So again, it depends. You might be in a school where there is no other person, and so you have to do all three. But for example, in Springfield, they have financial aid counselors specifically for high school students, and that's all they do is help students get financial aid to go to college.
Okay.
I'm not saying they don't do other, but that's their primary focus.
Primary role.
Right. Whereas I might be just doing the academic stuff or doing schedule changes, and someone else might be doing more social and emotional. So it depends again on your district, what resources they have, and what other staff they have to provide those services. So there might be a college counselor in a school. There might be a traditional school counselor schedule changes, and then there's a person doing mental health. So it's not the norm necessarily, because a lot of schools want us to be generalist. Right. Because when the kid walks in the door, you don't know what they need. And
rather than send them down the hall.
Right. So, think of going to the grocery store. You go to grocery stores now and they have a florist, a bank.
Exactly.
They have everything you need. You don't have to go elsewhere.
Right.
And some schools want the counselor to be able to do all of that. Now, it's not always possible because some students need more. I mentioned the three tiers. They're going to need more intense services, and that a traditional school counselor with caseloads of 200 to 400 or whatever it is will not be able to do that.
We're here with Bob Bardwell he is the executive director of the Massachusetts School Counselors Association. We're on our first commercial break. We'll be right back after this.
This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry. This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.
Welcome back, everyone, to today's edition of In Focus. We're here in the 22 News Plus studios. I've got Bob Bardwell across the desk from me. He's in the hot seat today. We're talking about your local school counselor, and I've already learned so much about school counselors that I already had no idea. But I have to imagine the counselors must be on the front lines more so. I would say maybe the teachers equally. The general perception in our communities is that schools are out of control, right? Whether they are or not, but that's a general perception, right? But to a certain degree, our young people are challenged more now, or have more challenges facing them now than you and I did when we were kids. So what are some of the things that counselors, teachers, administrators, what are they facing in the classrooms every day?
Well, just to clarify too, teachers and counselors have different roles, so they're not meant to do the same things. Certainly some teachers help, I would say triage. So they see a student who's upset or needs support or not doing well academically, they'll let the counselor know often. So we definitely want to work in tandem as partners. But yes, challenges today are more than ever before. It's tough to be a kid. There's so much, like you said, that's different now than ever before. So one of the biggest is I mentioned earlier, the mental health issues.
Right.
We're seeing many more diagnoses earlier in life. So things that may not have been treated before or identified, the kids were just told, suck it up, you got to conform, you got to do whatever. And now it's like, wait, the student has a disability or a mental health challenge. We have to do better. We can't just say, suck it up.
So Are our schools equipped to handle that, or is that all sort of the process of making our schools better?
So again, it depends. Some schools are very well have staff to support all levels and all types of challenges around mental health. Other schools are very different. So, for example, a rural school, they might have only one counselor, and there are not many mental health people in the community. They might be dealing with a lot of stuff because there's no one else, versus a larger
Wow.
community or a suburban community, perhaps, that has not only plenty of staff in the building, but then they have resources in the
Resources
community.
available, right?
And so it just, again, depends where you are and what resources you have. It also requires leadership, either in your school or your school district, who understand mental health is a
Right.
problem, a challenge, and that students need support to be able to handle that.
Let me stop. Is there a school? I can't imagine there's a school district around that doesn't recognize mental health as a challenge.
I don't have any research or data, but there probably are some, or there, again, the counselor is told you will schedule kids or you will go to help them get into college. And not that you can't talk about mental health, but that's not your primary role.
Interesting.
We do have a good number of, if you add up the school counselors, the adjustment counselors, and the social workers in Massachusetts, there's over 5,000. That's a good number. So I think most schools do at least have some staff. But even, again, in some communities, an elementary school might have a counselor once a week
Right.
because they go back and
Rotating
forth.
between schools
Right.
or whether within the district
Right.
or whatnot.
And
Wow.
obviously budgets are always tight. I mean, because of the pandemic relief funds that we got, then we did see an increase in some districts. But then when that funding went away, then you might see the district saying, well, yeah, no, we no longer can have
Right.
this person.
You bring up a very good point. You brought up the pandemic, which on one hand seems like it was yesterday, but on the other hand, it seems like it was ages ago. It was only 5 years ago. Was that a critical time in our education?
Absolutely. Right now, for example, you're seeing kindergartners who were born during the pandemic and maybe didn't have that socialization that they needed or weren't able to get out and be in the world like they are today.
Right.
So we're seeing some research and some data that, particularly in those earlier
Hmm.
grades, that students are not as well equipped to handle some of the emotional challenges. So, for example, a child who has always been with their parent or caregiver going into school and not being with that person could be really challenging. And so we've had, that happens all the time and every year. But I've heard from my colleagues
Right.
that this year is a bit more challenging because the kids are not used to being away from their caregiver.
Right. Well, and fast forward, those 14 and 15-year-olds during COVID are now the 19 and 20-year-olds
Sure.
who are maybe not socializing as well as they should be in college or in the workforce.
Right. I mean, I think this was happening before the pandemic, but we're seeing it now exacerbated because this thing called social media has become a real big challenge for even adults, right? We
Right.
can't put the phone down. We can't not be connected. And so our students, and this is, one of the big debates in education today is, do we have cell phones or not? Are
I
they
know.
in pouches? Are they out and away in a shoe rack, whatever? So that is definitely contributing to some of these issues. Now, in some ways, that has been good. So research is showing us that fewer students are using drugs and alcohol, that are
Okay.
doing bad things, smoking and et cetera, because they don't leave their house and they are connected through social media. So they don't need to go to their friend's house and have a party or do something they shouldn't be doing.
But they're missing those social
Of
skills.
course, right. So there's pluses and minuses, right? So you may not have some of those behaviors that are not great, but then you don't have, as you said, the social skills, whether or not they can't necessarily have what they need. Very concerning for most schools is how involved parents are, and I certainly appreciate parents and caregivers. We can't do it without them, but to the extreme where they're actually doing too much for their child. I heard
Not the proverbial, letting the baby bird fly.
right, and you need to give them that independence.
Right.
So just the other day, I heard of a district where they were interviewing new staff for teachers, and their parent came with them to the interview.
Oh, that's not just in the school district. That's in every
All right,
walk
but
of life.
that's
Yeah.
not going to help the kid. I mean, does that mean the parent's going to come with them to
Right.
teach too? And so I appreciate, again, the support, but at some point you got to let them go and let them flock to go out and be on their own.
Exactly. Let's switch gears now to safety in the schools. Is that an aspect that counselors are constantly dealing with?
Absolutely. First of all, I need to say the vast majority of schools are safe.
Oh, absolutely. I think,
But
yeah,
there's
I agree
certainly
with you.
some students that are afraid to go to school. That doesn't mean bad things don't happen in the schools. And again, it's that even on the radar screen of admin and staff to say, oh, we have a fill in the blank problem. And so we need to do a better job making sure our school is more welcoming. So safety is, I say when I go out and do trainings to my counselors, do you want to go to a place that you don't feel welcomed and not safe? Of course not.
Right.
I mean, you
It's like
have
any
to
workplace.
sometimes, right? They're choosing where to work. They choose where to live for the
Mhm.
most part, but kids don't have that choice because they live where their family lives. So, but yeah, we expect them to go to school, and we expect them maybe, especially if they have a parent who grew up in a different generation, be like, "Suck it up, kid. I don't care if you're being picked on. Go to
Right.
school because that's what you're supposed to do."
It's interesting you use the word picked on. Bullying has always been there. It really has. It's just been exacerbated by social media and technology. At least I feel that way. What do you feel being in the school systems?
Absolutely. Again,
Okay.
because you can do it in so many different ways. I mean, bullying today is not necessarily what it was like before. You don't
Yeah.
have to meet
You
out in the
meet
school.
in the
Right.
parking lot
Right.
after school or whatever.
Because
Yeah.
you can do it online, and that's almost, then
Almost
more
worse.
people, right.
Yeah.
And then
It's not
especially
physical pain, like,
it
having
could
a
be, but
schoolboy
usually not.
fight.
Right.
It's emotional pain, which
And
lasts longer.
once it's online, it doesn't go away.
Exactly.
And then, and kids unfortunately make mistakes. So they might post a picture or share a picture with someone that they shouldn't, and that will lead to trouble or difficulties.
We're here with Bob Bardwell. He is with the Massachusetts School Counselors Association. We're up on our second commercial break. We'll be right back after this.
This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry. This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.
Welcome back, everyone, to this edition of In Focus. We're here at the 22 News Plus studios. I've got Bob Bardwell across the desk from me. He is the executive director of the Massachusetts School Counselors Association. Bob, thank you for giving me some of your time. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Before we went to break, we were talking about school safety. And again, it's not just, the national news of guns in our schools. It's the bullying. It's the social media. It's the traditional picking on, that kind of thing. But that tends to, and correct me if I'm wrong, that sort of element leads to like an adult going to work. If you're not happy there, you're not going to go there. So what is attendance looking like in our schools? And is that something school counselors are working on?
Absolutely. And to expand on that just a bit, not only do you not want to go there, this place that's not safe or welcoming, you probably aren't going to do your best. Right.
Right.
So we talk about, you got to get really good grades and get good test scores and, all these things. But if you're not feeling welcomed and you're like on edge, you're not going to you're not going to achieve those high results.
Right.
So we want to keep that in mind. But yes, attendance has become an issue because more and more kids are chronically absent. That means they miss 10% of the school year, which doesn't seem like a lot, but that's 18 days in a year.
Is there still the rule if you miss X number of days, you stay back?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
So again, depends on your school. Certainly the elementary grades have different expectations than higher grades. In high school, there's some districts or schools that have policies that will remove credit if you miss so many days that are unexcused. So you just don't feel like going to school for 15 days, you may not get credit for that class. So instead, you might have earned
may not graduate.
So that can be an issue, right? You may have earned an 80 in the class, but you're not getting the credit, and you need credits to graduate. So that might be delaying your graduation. So schools are trying there in many ways to combat the attendance issues. It's getting better. The state just released last week the absentee rates for 24-25, and it went like down 2.2%.
Good news?
It's good news in that it's fewer kids absent more, but it's also, one of the things that you got to keep in mind with that data is there's fewer students these days. So increase in some ways should be expected because you're not having the same number of students you did last year.
Okay. So what is the major cause for lack of attendance in the schools? Can you put your finger on it, or is it a multitude of factors that sort of lead to, safety, boredom, home life? I mean,
all of the above.
Really?
So there's kids that can't come to school because maybe of a mental health or a medical issue. There's kids that don't want to go or avoid it, so they're averse to school because of being bullied or they don't feel connected. It's not realistic for them. And then you've got students that it's a combination of all of that, where you just, for whatever reason, you can't do it. And I think, probably 20 to 30 years ago and previously, you would had kids that they figured, okay, I'll just do it because that's what's expected of me. The kids today just aren't there yet, because in some ways they've been either, told by family, hey, you don't have to. And other times they're making the decision and they're running the show. I also want to mention some cultures don't have the same expectations about school than I would say the American culture, and that if they come from other countries or other places, they might not view finishing school is not a big deal. Going to school is not a big deal.
It's interesting you say that because, again, maybe it's my ignorance. I think of people coming here from other countries primarily to get ahead. So, and I would think school is a priority rather than not.
So it will depend. Some communities will say they're here for the right reasons and you're going to go to school, kid, no matter what. And others are like, well, in our country, it's okay if you don't go to school in 10th grade because we don't expect that from you.
Wow.
And so I think you're seeing a shift too, where some of the folks that are here aren't carrying that belief like we're here to better ourselves necessarily. I mean, they might be here for those reasons, but school isn't the way to go.
Right.
And we're seeing that, not every fewer kids are going on to college. So we're seeing that shift where, that isn't the dream goal. I'm going to go to work. And we're seeing that too in terms of vocational education. There's more kids wanting to get into vocational schools these days, which is great.
Absolutely.
Because there was a time where they were, I'll say, dumping grounds.
Right.
No one wanted to go there.
And I grew up in that era.
Yeah.
You probably did
Yeah.
too.
And so I'm really glad to see that has shifted because we need excellent electricians as much as we need.
And college is so
engineers.
overpriced.
Absolutely, yeah. They see their friends and peers or relatives coming back with a 4-year college degree working at a fast food place. And they're like, why am I going to do that and have all this debt?
Exactly. And then you hear these, and I've got some friends whose kids went through local vocational technical schools, and they're making good money as a 19, 20, 24-year-old with zero debt.
Right. And loving what they do.
Exactly. Is there a shortage of counselors? You hear there's a shortage of paraprofessionals and people throughout school districts, but are counselors also in that bucket that there's a shortage of them?
Absolutely. In some places, right? So in districts that have more challenges, perhaps urban districts or where they don't pay as well. So we have some local communities that are in negotiations right now. And that's one of the big sticking points is I can go to a district, 5 miles away and get paid much more than where I am now. And so that's why unions are pushing hard to increase those rates. Face it, every educator is underpaid.
Right.
It's just the value we have on that as a society. But some districts are able to, and we got to keep that in mind. Not all districts have the resources to just give huge pay raises.
It sounds like counselors really play such a crucial role in a student's upbringing from a number of different ways, whether it's class selection, mental health, career guidance. Not that I'm discounting teachers by any stretch of the imagination, because it's a completely different role, but counselors really sound like sort of that linchpin to life.
Well, I'm biased, obviously. I've been in the profession 32 years, so in public schools. So yes, we are super important, but it takes a village, right? It's not just because a student may not connect with a counselor for whatever reason, but may connect with their coach or their math teacher. And that's fine. The key is, does every student have some adult in the building that they can get support from?
Right.
Obviously, the work that counselors do is a little bit more focused because we are working on those 3 buckets. So, and that's why it's so important to educate folks about the counselors of today, if allowed by the school administration, to get out and know all students. To have a kid, if in the schools I worked with, if my students didn't know me at graduation, that's my problem.
Right.
But it was a small school, so fortunately I knew my kids. The issue was then, do I know all the other kids than just on my caseload?
Exactly. Bob Bardwell, Executive Director of Massachusetts School Counselors Association. Thank you so very much for joining me today.
You're welcome.
Wonderful conversation. Thanks again. I appreciate it.
Let's do it again.
This is 22 News in Focus with Patrick Berry.